Hello, welcome to the Mind Expanse. In this video, I'm going to talk about the secret to getting a great night's sleep and waking up refreshed every morning. So I wanted to start this lecture by asking you a question. So what is the similarity between 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and the Bhopal disaster? Incidentally, these are the 3 biggest industrial accidents in the modern era. What did they all have in common? And the answer is all 3 accidents occurred at night on night shift. And this really outlines how important sleep is. In fact, sleep really, it's one of the most important factors in healthy living to this day. And insomnia remains perhaps one of the biggest problems of our modern society. Because poor sleep is associated with so many things. Daytime fatigue, low energy, moodiness, irritability, forgetfulness, impaired learning, impaired concentration, clumsiness, and accidents. But it's also associated with heart attacks, strokes, and even death. And as a mental health provider, insomnia is my #1 presenting patient complaint, and it constitutes over 50% of my patients, and over 85% of my entire patient caseload have insomnia to some degree. That means over 50,000 people have hired me to treat their insomnia. And furthermore, I am consistently hired at least once a month to give these lucrative presentations on how to cure insomnia, often at huge auditoriums of over 200, sometimes 300 people. So not only is insomnia a huge problem, but the ability to treat insomnia as well as teach others to treat their own insomnia is a very, very valuable skill. And this is a skill I'm going to teach you in this lecture. So you can use the information in this lecture to consistently get an awesome night's sleep, to be able to coach others on how to get excellent sleep, and also use this information to give presentations to help others get a great night's sleep. So after you've completed these series of lectures, I guarantee you will understand the physiology of sleep. You will understand how sleep works, and you will understand the proven techniques for getting great sleep. And you will understand how to get a great night's sleep for yourself. And with this information, you'll be able to coach others on how to get a great night's sleep. So let's begin. So first, I want to define insomnia. So I define insomnia as #1, trouble falling asleep. #2, waking up multiple times throughout the night. #3, waking up too early in the morning. And #4, not feeling rested when you wake up. And I think one of the driving factors of insomnia kind of goes like this. So let's say for some reason, which we'll get into later, you have trouble falling asleep. Well, that causes you to worry about not falling asleep, which in essence causes you to have more trouble falling asleep, which in itself ends up being a vicious cycle. Insomnia itself is a vicious cycle. And ultimately, the goal of treating insomnia is to reach a state where you are no longer in insomnia. For example, can you remember a time when you were young, maybe in junior high, in high school, maybe even college, where you were able to sleep when you wanted to, you got up when you wanted to, and you felt very refreshed in the morning? But somewhere along the lines, something happened. Maybe starting work, maybe the trials of adult life. But now we have insomnia. And this is what we're trying to treat so that eventually you can get back to the state where you are no longer in insomnia. But actually, did you know that as big of a problem as insomnia is to this day, it's actually a fairly recent phenomenon in the history of humankind? And actually, it really goes back to this date here, the year 1879. I mean, there was a little bit of insomnia before this date, but it really was a very small percentage of the population. It wasn't the epidemic that it is now. Do you know what happened in 1879? The invention of the light bulb by Thomas Edison. And I wanted to tell you a little story about how this impacted us, because not only is it kind of a fun and interesting story, but it'll help put insomnia into a larger perspective. And our story actually begins about 60 years earlier in the date of 1820 with something called the Industrial Revolution and the invention of something called the night shift, which at this time was night shift by candlelight. So the Industrial Revolution roughly began around 1760 to about 1840, and it was actually fueled by the textile industry, the iron industry, and the steel industry. And it was around 1820 when these factories began to realize that it was far cheaper to keep operations going for 24 hours straight rather than close at night and reopen in the morning. And these factories basically had 2 shifts that lasted 12 hours each. And the factory would be open continuously for 13 days, and then it would close for 1 day, and then it would open back again for another 13 days. So basically what would happen is, so a day shift person would work for 12 hours, and then his or her night shift counterpart would take over for the next 12 hours, and each person would work for 13 days, and then every 2 weeks, they would get 1 Sunday off. And then the day shift would switch to night shift, and the night shift would switch to day shift. And again, after 13 days, they would have 1 day off, and then they would switch again. Can you imagine having to work night shift for 13 days, getting 1 day off, and then having to work day shift 12 hours a day for 13 days straight, then getting 1 day off, and then having to work night shift again? Conditions were brutal. And with the 1879 invention of the light bulb, the night shift became very popular and spread all throughout this modern society. Well, of course, people can only take so much of this, and in 1886, the workers rioted in the streets of Chicago to demand work hours be reduced to 8-hour shifts. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful until in the 1930s, they got help from the Catholic Church, who intervened and called these 2-week-long 12-hour operations cruel, and they recommended they stop. And so in 1933, the U.S. Congress proposed the National Industrial Recovery Act, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually signed it into law, and this proposed a minimum wage and also a maximum number of workdays that can be worked. Unfortunately, in 1934, it was declared unconstitutional and stricken from history, but this paved the way that in 1935, it was replaced by something called the Wagner Act, which would eventually lead to 8-hour work shifts, eventually a 40-hour work week, and this concept of having weekends off. And this eventually led the way to now in these 24-hour factories, we don't have 2 12-hour shifts, but rather we have 3 8-hour shifts for these continuous 24-hour factories. And for human history, the cat is now out of the bag. Because before, when we didn't have electricity, most people just kind of lived based on the sun. You know, when the sun was out, we woke up, and when it got dark, we fell asleep. But now, with electricity and the modern age, we have big factories working 24 hours a day. We have brightly lit warehouses where these companies are churning out operations for continuously for 24-hour operations. We have big, brightly lit, huge city metropolises. And we have nightlife. And we have activities to do at night, even in the privacy of your own home. And now we have insomnia. So the big question is, what can we do about insomnia? Well, first, I want to talk about the big misconception we have about sleep. And the misconception basically goes like this. Sleep is good, and therefore more sleep must be better. Because I frequently hear my clients tell me, I sleep 9 to 10 hours a night, but I'm still tired. And this is due to a fundamental misunderstanding about how sleep works. We assume that we have to sleep 8 hours, and if we sleep 9 hours, that's just 1 hour better, and if we slept 6 hours, that's 2 hours worse, right? This is actually a simplistic view that is just plain wrong, and it's actually counterproductive to sleep, and this is actually potentially dangerous to your health. A better way to think about healthy sleep is to think that healthy sleep exists on two axes. One, the number of hours slept, but also the quality of sleep that we get. In other words, we want to maximize the area under the rectangle. So this guy here, he got a full 8 hours sleep, but he also got a good, excellent quality of sleep. So he's actually very, very healthy. He's gotten very healthy sleep. He probably wakes up feeling very good and is not tired in the day and is probably very productive throughout the day. Now this next guy, he also slept 8 hours, but you see, his quality of sleep was a lot less. So even though these two people got the exact same amount of sleep, this second guy is going to be feeling more tired. So arbitrary mathematics, we're saying that the area under the rectangle is much smaller, and therefore he's gotten less total healthy sleep. So he may wake up, even though, again, he's gotten the exact same 8 hours as the first guy, he's going to feel more tired. He may just feel a little cloudy throughout the day. He's just not going to feel as refreshed as the first guy. And here we have the third guy he's only gotten 6 hours sleep, and yet he's gotten great quality sleep. So he's not doing as well as the first guy who got 8 hours of great sleep. He's still doing less than the first guy, but he's doing much better than the second guy, even though he got less sleep, because the area under the rectangle for him, it's less than the first guy, but it's still much bigger than the second guy. So he may not feel as great as the first guy, but he still feels much better when he wakes up than the second guy. He's feeling much more energetic and much more focused and productive than the second guy. And now look at the fourth guy. This guy got 10 hours sleep. Looks like maybe more, but he got very poor quality sleep. And this fourth guy is he's the worst off, even though he's actually gotten the most sleep, right? He's really going to feel tired, and he might be the guy that kind of falls asleep in meetings, is overall less productive throughout the day, and may even be at more of a risk of medical problems. So the goal is not just to maximize the number of hours slept, but to maximize the number of hours slept in balance with the quality of sleep. In other words, the goal is to maximize the area under the rectangle. So how do we maximize quality of sleep? Well, that is the million-dollar question, which I am going to teach you later in this course. But first, we need to learn how sleep actually works. So that ends this lecture. Please join me in lecture 2, where we're going to talk about the science of sleep physiology.